5:30, right? Be surprised, right, if we turn it over. All right, why don't we, I think we're ready to go here, so we'll call the meeting to order. This is a meeting of the City Council Public Safety Subcommittee. If we could have clerk call the roll, please.
Chairman Martin.
Here.
Councilor Elliott.
Here.
Councilor Nord.
Here.
3 present.
Thank you. This is another in the series of meetings that were suggested to us by the Citywide Neighborhood Group. We've been kind of going down the list that was presented late last year. And the topic for tonight was police dispatch procedures, how dispatch calls are processed, how they come in, what information is taken, how that gets relayed to officers in the field, and things like that. So I know police chief is here with some other folks from the police department. I think they have a brief presentation they would like to make, and then we'll open it up for questions. I don't know if Mr. Manager, if you have any introductory remarks, but.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I don't, so I will quickly pass it off to the chief so that we can get right to the presentation.
Right.
Thank you. Good evening. And I brought 2 individuals with me tonight that are going to handle the beginning of the discussion. Deputy Superintendent William Taylor, who's in charge of communications under his area of the department, which is support services, and he's accompanied by Mr. Charles Willett, who is directly responsible for the communications center of the Lowell Police Department. And they'll be able to walk you through some of the information around communications and dispatching and answer any questions that you may have, and I'm here as well, obviously.
Okay, and if I could just note, Councilor Mendonça, Councilor Rita Mercy are also here. So.
Thank you, Councilor Martin, Councilor Elliott, and Councilor Noon. The Lowell Police Department operates the city's emergency communications center. We operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We have a total of 27 full-time employees that staff the room. In addition to the responsibilities for the city of Lowell, which we cover obviously police, fire dispatch, and also emergency medical services, we also operate as a backup for the city of Lawrence in the event of their emergency communications center was to go down, and they similarly operate as a backup for us. I've prepared 2 things for you this evening. The first one you'll see is a breakdown of our 2012 calls for service into the communications room. As you can see that last year we responded to in excess of 93,000 calls for service combined in the city of Lowell. And you can also see the top 10 call codes, which are the types of calls that the police department and the fire department responds to. Interestingly enough, and something that I think is good, the number 1 category for our call code is proactive policing. We call it directed patrol, but it's a proactive approach to law enforcement. So that accounted for 20% of the calls. And then as you can see clearly, it breaks down from there. Medical is 14%, motor vehicle and traffic stops are 9%. And then interestingly enough, the disturbance, the general category of disturbances, which is explained in the overview, what that group entails, accounted for 6%. The call breakdown geographically is pretty evenly distributed between the 3 geographic sectors that we use for the police department, the east, north, and west. It's approximately 1/3 of the calls for service to each geographic section of the city, which is very evenly distributed. On the second page, you'll see the call breakdown. Actually, you can see it on the first and second page by day of the week and also by the time of the day. And you can see, not unexpectedly, Friday is a very active day for calls for service. That's when we get our most call volume. And you'll see that Sunday we get the least amount of calls. The other thing noteworthy on the back, you'll see that the breakdown between police and fire calls, you'll see that there's many more police calls for service than fire. The reason for that, in almost all cases, we do send police officers to every one of the fire calls, but not necessarily the reverse, obviously. So that's just a little bit of statistical breakdown in terms of last year, in terms of, what we've done for the communications room and how it's distributed. Any questions on that? Or?
None right here. Other members of the subcommittee? Questions? Councilor Mercier?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Deputy Chief Taylor, when you send out, when someone calls repeatedly because it seems like someone isn't responding to loud noises in the neighborhood brought forth through a party, what is the policy or procedure there? I made a motion some time ago for the decibel reader, but the thing is, so the police respond and they go there and they say, keep the noise down, and then it just doesn't subside just for a while and then it goes back up again. Is there some sort of policy that if the police respond again, they start issuing warnings and fines or whatever? Because it seems to me that there's a segment of a population, and thank God it isn't, massive, it's just minor, that have no respect for anybody, nor their neighbors, nor anybody else, that once the police go, they're probably thinking, well, they'll be sick of coming back, we'll just put the party back to normal, and then some. And that irritates me because, when we say the noise ordinance, it isn't about it's got to be a bad decibel level. If it persists for a certain amount of time, that in itself, you don't need a decibel reader to figure that out. You just go back and say, look, if we have to come back again, someone's going to be fined here, and you start hitting them in the pocketbook or in the wallet, and they're going to know that something is not right here. I don't like people just being so belligerent that they're going to disrupt the quiet quality of life for the neighborhood. And I'm not saying people shouldn't have a party, but keep it down and respect the wishes of the people around them. So what is the policy here? What happens?
Well, there's no set policy specifically, so each case is handled on a case-by-case basis. Generally speaking, 10 p.m. is the threshold for the quiet hours. There's case law on that. After 10 p.m., we have much more enforcement capability in terms of the peace and tranquility of the neighborhood in the city. Generally speaking, what the police will do is they'll go the first time, try and give the people a warning, ask them to curtail the loud noise or behavior. They have to go back a second time. Usually it's going to entail more stringent action. And then in the worst case scenario, if the people are totally belligerent and not willing to cooperate with the police and bring down the noise level, we do have the option of making an arrest for disturbing the peace. Usually it's the person that's in charge of the dwelling or the location.
Which they should be. I mean, if they're having the party, they are responsible to the people that are there. Just like a driver of a car, if a passenger is throwing things out a window, it's the driver that will be cited, but thank you.
But the other thing that I'll mention is we go to every call. So everybody that calls in that complains about a disturbance, whatever it may be, the police department should be responding to that call.
And you
to
have
address
a
the neighborhood
CAD
concerns.
system in place whereby they look at and see. Neighbors don't want to hurt other neighbors, but, there's a limit to what goes on.
Right.
Thank you.
I mean, maybe you could take us through with this system, what happens, so I have an incident across the street, I call, and what happens from there?
I have a demonstration that I can show you. We have some new software in conjunction with the AVL system and some of the other.
Deputy Taylor, maybe you could speak into the microphone on the end there, even if you just hold it. It doesn't come across on television if you're not mic'd up.
Yeah, unfortunately, but what this displays, this is what the actual police officer sees in his cruiser now. This is in conjunction with our MIS department, worked with a local company in Hudson, New Hampshire, and they were able to put this together. So you'll see on the right-hand side, this is actual live data, and you'll see that the calls come in, they're categorized by time, so the most recent one is at the top. and they're also categorized by priority level. So obviously, red is more important. So you'll see there's a medical call, there's some other, and the yellow one is obviously somewhat of a medium level call. And when the officer sees this on the screen, he'll pull this up. For example, he'll pull up that one, and he gets the information that the dispatch has put into our CAD system. Let me just, hold on 1 second here. You have to connect to the city Wi-Fi here, so. You'll see that he pulls up the information, hopefully it comes up here, and you'll see that he gets the information entered into the system. So he sees who called, the location, the previous call history. It doesn't seem to want to cooperate here. Unfortunately, it's the Wi-Fi network. I think that's what we're trying to use here. But in any event, that's a general idea of what they'll see. They see the CAD system on the right, and the dispatcher enters the information into the CAD call. It comes over to this, and then you'll see that let's try it again here. You'll see that the officer, when he pulls up the information, it's going to show him exactly where the call is, who called, the previous calls to the location, any hazards at the location that may be operating. So that's generally speaking how it works.
And so dispatchers take that information over
Yes.
the phone?
Yes.
And what are the types of questions they ask, or they?
Well, obviously, they're going to ask where the location, if the information comes in on a landline phone, that information is automatically populated into the CAD call, so they know the exact location anyway. If it calls on a cell phone, it gets redirected from a state police dispatch center. And then when the call comes in, he's going to ask what the disturbance is, what kind of help they need, where is the location, the person's name, if they're willing to supply it, and any of the detailed information, as much information as they can to help the officer or the fire department respond to the location. Yeah, unfortunately, it's not responding. But.
And who sets the priority? How does that all get?
That would be based on the nature of the call. So that if the person calls up about a robbery in progress, obviously that's the highest level category, the highest priority, and that's all automatically determined by the CAD system and the operator that takes the information in.
Okay.
So, but you can see on this, what you can see is that's what the officer's going to see. He's going to see these color-coded areas where the call is located. And unfortunately, it's not working through the Wi-Fi system, but if he hit on that red button, he would get a display of all the narrative information, which would be included previous calls, their hazards that would be in the location. And in the future, very shortly, they'll be able to see their own vehicle and the location of other officers' vehicles displayed, so they'll be able to see if they're in the closest vehicle or if there's other people that are closer, just in live time.
And that an enhancement from the GPS?
Yes,
system that's
that
going in?
allows us to do that. So it's a great benefit for the efficiency. Officer safety is very important, and obviously it allows the police department to be more responsive to our customers, which are the citizens.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Noon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard you mention about a cell phone. If somebody called from the cell phone, it's go directly to the state police. It's not coming to our dispatcher. Why is that?
That's how the technology is currently set up. The state police receive all the cell phone 911 calls. The technology is evolving to allow, at some point in the near future, if communities wish to receive those calls directly, I think that we'll be able to see that happen again in the near future. As you know, we have another project sort of being studied, which is the concept of a regional 911 center. And I think that should we move forward in that direction, the cell phone calls coming directly to that regional center would be very advantageous because we would have enough staff to be able to handle that extra call volume as well. And then there are funds available that are associated with the receipt of all of those 911 calls, which would be an additional benefit to the overall operating costs of the communication center.
What are the percentage of the call through cell phone that go directly to the state police and then coming to the dispatcher center?
It's about 50% now.
It's at least 50%. It's
At
probably,
least.
there's probably more cell phone calls to the state police than there are landline calls. Many people, even in the city, are giving up their landlines and just going with their cell phones as their primary method of communication. So we only receive the landline 911 calls. So again, it's at least 50-50 at this point. I think it might even be higher. It might be more cell phone calls than there are landline calls.
Wouldn't you say that would delay time, respond time for you all to do?
Absolutely, there's a delay. The reality of it is that when a citizen's in distress, they've been the victim of a crime or they've just witnessed something very traumatic, they're calling for help, and they're very excited. And so the first thing they have to do is determine where the person might be. Where is this event occurring? Because only then can they route that call to the proper police department. And so it takes some time to sometimes calm that person down, get that information, and know to call the Lowell Police Department. And then they stay on the line, they pass the call through to us, and they stay on the line, and then we have to sort of backtrack and get some of that information again. So yes, there is a bit of a delay that we would prefer not to have, but the current system requires it.
And we are not the only city in
Oh, no,
town
it's
that-
this is statewide.
Statewide, okay. Mr. Chairman, and another question is around the issue of determining the priority of the call. My understanding from your presentation, Deputy Taylor, that the call coming in, dispatchers take the call and then put out that information through the CAT system. Is the dispatcher who's the one who determined the priority of the call and put it into the CAT system?
Yes, that's right, based on what the person that's calling tells them the issue is. So if they are calling about a serious issue, like a robbery or whatever it might be, or a disturbance that includes an assault, then certainly that would be the highest priority, medical situation. If it's a past incident that's nonviolent, then obviously that gets a lower priority. And then that's put in the queue. So obviously, they dispatch the higher priority calls first. What we do encourage when we talk to the dispatchers is that if it's a high call volume time and they're experiencing some backlog, that they tell the people that when they call that we will get to you. It may take a little bit of a time because we have a very busy situation right now. But we will get to you, and just be patient and call us back if anything changes in the situation that you're encountering. But we try and, as much as possible, give people some idea of how long it might take.
If a caller will have a language barrier, your dispatcher, the 27 dispatcher, full-time dispatcher that you have, speak different language,
We
I
do.
assume.
We have dispatchers that obviously speak Spanish, Khmer. In addition to that, we have access to a interpreter service 24/7 that we can call up, and based on a check-down list, they will make a determination of the appropriate language and get an interpreter on the phone, and that's through the statewide 911 system that we have access to that.
Does the dispatchers that you have now getting like a training, annual training, or going out and get some other professional trainings and stuff like that, additional to what they have now?
Yes. Yes, they do. We train them constantly. As a matter of fact, we just had an extensive training program. Do you want to talk?
We
Mrs. Chuck will
actually have to train them 16 hours a year in 2 different subjects through the state. And also, they're all emergency medical dispatchers that if you call and you're injured or someone's injured in your family, they can walk you through until help arrives. So it's actually a really nice program to have there. Helping out the citizens. Also, they go for CPR training and additional training if they want to put in for class, domestic violence, and so on and so forth.
One more question, Mr. Chairman, about the noise. I know Councilor Mercier spoke of a noise in terms of party and loud music and stuff, but that you can really address by certainly send dispatchers, send cruisers there, and give warning, and if they don't comply with, you go back the second time, you can charge them with disturb the peace.
Yes.
But for a car that put in this loud, what you can call boombox, you know, loud music, really loud and beyond their allowed, beyond what allowed. Is there a way to address that issue? The car that drive by your
Yes.
resident areas and having so much, I mean, turn on the music and just really
Yes.
wake you up?
Yes, noise is noise, and there's actually a motor vehicle offense, harsh and objectionable noise. So we can attack that issue from a slightly different angle, but definitely can address that. I think the only problem we face with a lot of the disturbance calls is they tend to come in around the same time. So, for example, recently there's been a lot of calls about fireworks, obviously. And so we have a very heavy concentration of fireworks calls in a very short amount of time. So at the same time, a particular individual might be calling about a disturbance related to fireworks, we may have at that same time 5, 6, 7, 10 other fireworks-related calls in other parts of the city, because they typically come in at the same couple of hour period. And so that creates a problem, obviously, for us trying to dispatch people at the same time, multiple locations all over the city. And I think generally speaking, people are very understanding. They understand that they're not the only person that's dealing with this, but it does get very irritating for the citizens, and I completely understand that. And we just try and get the officers to dispatch to these locations and try and tackle the issue as quickly and efficiently as they can. They try to deal with it in such a way that they can alleviate the disturbance as quickly as possible. And it requires some finesse, quite candidly, because they don't, you know, they have a multitude of other calls to get to at the same time.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Other, Councilor Elliott?
Thank you. So what is the peak volume time? You referenced high volume at a particular
If you were to
day or
take,
evening.
yeah, if you were to look at the whole city 24/7 over the course of the whole year, I think our highest call volume time is between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. That's typically when it is. Obviously, that changes a little bit in the summer months, and it changes certainly on the 4th of July. That's probably going to be between 8 and midnight, you know? But if you were to look at it over 365 days a year, it's between 5 and 7 p.m. And then it drops off. Actually, most of the year after 9 p.m. is relatively lesser call volume in the city.
And why is that?
Well, people are in school, they're home going to work, you know, getting ready for their daytime duties. But obviously that does change depending on the time of the year and the day of the week.
And what's the nature of those calls between 5 and 7, that peak?
A lot of them deal with traffic issues,
Right.
motor vehicle accidents, school-related issues, either children getting out of school or coming home from school. Generally speaking, a lot of it is tied to people either coming home from school or coming home from work.
So of the 93,000 or so calls we get last year, is that up or down from last year? Or what is it, a trend, increase, decrease?
A little bit down,
Level.
we think.
Excuse me?
A little bit. A little bit down in
little
12
bit down,
compared to
okay.
11. Yeah. Not a great deal, though. Not a great deal.
So it's pretty consistent. What percentage of those calls never get answered?
Say that again?
What percentage of those calls just don't get answered? Never
They all get
responded?
answered.
Well, I
should.
can tell you, we have all experienced that people have called us and say, look, I've called the police a number of times, and they just never came. So that's why when you say they're all answered, they're not all answered. So through the CAD system, is there a closeout process? Okay, we put this in, this was logged, and this is how it was responded. And are there any instances where it's just not put in? I mean, I guess the answer you're going to tell me is no,
Right.
but even
Well,
if
that
it's a
shouldn't
day
happen.
later or a phone call to
Right.
residents, I can tell you, I've been here for a long time, and you said it, residents do get irritated when they call, and they call multiple times, and I just looked, we got an email, we get several emails, particularly on fireworks, and one of them said, look, I called a number of times, and I never get a call back. And I can understand that you're dealing with probably a high volume of calls, but I think it does go a long way. for the city as well as the department, maybe it's an hour later, maybe it's a day later, but at least they know that, okay, we got the call, this is what the situation was, and this is the reason why we didn't get to it, but we're aware of it. In this particular instance, they called for 2 days, and it was in Lower Highlands, and I'm happy to forward you the email, and it was about fireworks. And I think Council Mercy kind of made a good point. You know, if the police don't show up, if there's no, you know, the neighbor will continue to do it just out of spite. So,
If I could just respond for a moment. I don't know if you're referring, was that the Facebook posting that you might have seen attached in an email? I'm not sure.
no, this was this, I can give you the address, but it's Lower Centerville.
So one of the things that we are now able to tell, because I've done a little research in the last few days, looking into some of the concerned residents or some of the issues that have been highlighted around fireworks. And because we have the AVL technology available in the cruisers now, I can actually see the calls. I can actually look at the call. And you're right, what we gave you, those 90,000 plus calls, are actually CAD entered calls. So those are not the number of times the phone rang in the communications center. Those are actually calls that were assigned for personnel to respond to. So, you know, we may get 4 or 5 calls about one event, and only one gets noted in the CAD, because if we get 5 calls about a motor vehicle accident, we don't enter it 5 times, unless it appears to be 2 different accidents, because the location is wrong. You know, somebody misquotes the streets where the accident actually is, and it might get noted twice. And then we adjust it in the CAD to reference the correct call. But we don't keep entering them. So what we gave you is the actual assigned calls. So we do assign personnel to go to those calls. But now, as a result of the AVL information, we're actually able to see the officers drive to the location and respond accordingly. And I did that with some of the complaints around the fireworks, and I can actually see the units respond to the location in close proximity to when they were dispatched on the call. So I do know in a couple of the cases that they did in fact respond, even though publicly it's being noted otherwise in the press that we did not respond, and I can see the cruisers go off at that location. So we still need to find out more from the officers as to what the outcome was and what they observed and so forth, but I'm actually able to see that now. So it's going to be a useful tool to, you know, either confirm or dispel some of the thoughts, but maybe our error is that we don't get back to the caller, you know, because sometimes we don't have the means, sometimes we don't have a phone number, sometimes we don't have a name, and we can't get back to people. And so what I've tried to do is, when people are communicating with me either through email, I've gotten quite a few emails from citizens, and I always respond to let them know that I've received their email, who I've assigned it to, and that I've instructed that person to respond to them, and they can certainly always get back in touch with me. But we've tried to increase our communication back to citizens. So sometimes it's easy. One of the things that we're noting that we're going to try to address is people are posting. They did it a lot around the fireworks. They were posting to our Facebook page requesting police assistance to a call, and that's not what our Facebook page is not monitored by the radio room, by the communications center. It's monitored by employees that don't work nights or weekends, you know, if you will. It's not intended for that purpose, so we're going to try to put something out there so folks understand that. We also get messages left on business lines sometimes, so we're still trying to figure out why that happens. So we need folks to just call the emergency communications center to get the police response, or to call the commanding officer if they're not satisfied. That's always, there's always a supervisor available to field inquiries should they feel that people are not coming. And, but again, you know, we're not saying that 100% of the time that, you know, everything works perfectly, but, you know, we have additional tools available now to take a look at that.
Okay. You know, I can actually understand why they may post to that Facebook, because they may say, guess what, maybe my neighbor's going to know that not only that I called, but that the police are going to be on here, so hopefully they'll stop. I mean, I'm sure at some point when you're scared, you do anything. So of the 90,000 calls, 93,000 calls, it's about 1,800 a month, generally speaking. If you do, you know, simple math, it's, you know, 250 calls on the average a week. How many, at the high volume, how many vehicles or officers do you have to dispatch those? I mean, I'm trying to get down to, you know, how how can we respond? And I know you have to prioritize, it makes all the sense in the world, but does the staffing levels correlate to the number of high-volume calls at that point?
And we do take a look at that when we determine cruiser district, patrol districts, and how many officers we deploy. We do regularly do an analysis of activity levels. We recently, within the last year, we changed the start times of the shifts. And we did that taking into account the busy times of the day. For example, one of our shifts used to start at 5 p.m., which you've heard Deputy Taylor say is when calls actually spike. That was not a good time for us to be starting to sort of roll our half of our fleet out there. So we changed the start time. We moved it back so that everybody's already out on the roads when call volume peaks. So we do consider that. But let me just give you a perspective. It may help to look at an actual day, which we'll look at, if you don't mind, we'll look at the 4th of July, because that's what I have, because I wanted you to understand the call volume on that day. So on the 4th of July, in that full day cycle, we had 314 calls for service. And taking it down to the hours of 6 p.m. to 11 p.m., just looking at that particular stretch of time, there were 129 calls for service. So to give you an idea of what was going on in the city, so that was when the call volume increased substantially for the fireworks. But I want you to know what else was going on. There was 1 robbery call, there was 2 fire calls, there was 3 unwanteds, 3 domestics, 3 assaults, 4 accidents, 6 fights, 6 disturbances, 7 alarms, 15 medical calls. We had a high number of medical calls on the 4th of July, which I would attribute to the high heat conditions. We had 27 instances of what Deputy Taylor explained to you about our proactive policing. So 27 instances where officers went off as they are assigned to do by the directions that they receive from their sector commanders for pockets in their various sectors that require extra attention. So the sector commanders look at crime trends, current crime trends, and they give the officers assignments. And so each day when they go out on patrol, they know that they have to spend some time in this particular intersection, or patrol this particular neighborhood due to car breaks, and so forth, or move the street level activity that maybe it's the panhandlers at a certain time of day. They have targeted activities that they must, that we ensure that they do. So there were 27 of those in that time period. Of all of those calls, so again, there were 129 calls, 38 of them were for fireworks. So it was a pretty intense amount of calls in a short amount of time. We have 11 patrol districts in the city. So those are all staffed with at least 1 patrol vehicle in the early evening hours. 4 of those sectors are doubled up. So we have 2 cars in each of those, again, based on density of population and call volume in those neighborhoods. We have 2 patrol vehicles in those 4 additional neighborhoods. So that's sort of the size of the patrol force, and then we would have extra officers out there from supervisors to the response unit that we have, to the investigators, the detectives that are out there, and so forth. So it's supplemented by additional resources. And if we should put additional, there are certain times that we will put additional officers out there to respond to events in the city or and so forth. So there's extra resources available. But that would be, those are the cruiser districts, and then there are route officers that are sometimes available as well. So that's just a general overview.
So at that peak time, when you received 129 calls, how many police officers were available to respond within that particular time frame? Did that 129 include the 38 for fireworks, or
Yes.
it did?
Yes.
As well as the assaults, as well as the robberies. Okay, the robbery. Okay,
So probably in the vicinity about 20,
that's a lot of
20.
calls. What was that time frame?
Probably 20.
5 hours.
So the 129 was in 5 hours.
5 hours, right. And if you look at it, the domestic calls probably tied up at least 2 officers for anywhere from a half an hour to an hour, each call, each domestic call. Never mind all the other variety of calls.
An accident as well. An accident's going to tie an officer up for a bit of time.
So on that day, you increased the staffing level, looking at past patterns that we're going to put on as many
Right.
officers as
As
necessary.
we reasonably could, that's right.
And again, it depends on what else is going on, that was the 4th of July, but yet they weren't, the fireworks in the city weren't until the next night, so we had a plan in place for the next day as well on the 5th. Because of the weather conditions, you had large numbers of people all along the riverbanks,
Right.
as normal, like on a weekend.
Right.
You know, people there at the beach, the watercraft. There was a river rescue that occurred that day that the police department assisted the fire department in. So there was a lot of activity going on. People were out and about. But again, the heat played a factor in terms of the number of medical calls. It was just generally probably
No, I-
not an atypical 4th of July, if you will.
Right. No, I understand it. So medical calls, we routinely send police officers, are they the first responders, or should those be, they come into us, should they be routed to the police and/or EMS? Would that reduce the number? I mean, we'll still respond to them, but should we be sending police officers to those?
In a lot of occasions, we do. It depends on the information the operator takes from the caller. So, for example, if it's any kind of a critical situation where they're concerned about the safety of the person,
We get a lot of those, I mean,
Right.
that's,
they're going to send the nearest available unit, which oftentimes is a police officer,
Oh.
until a fire department and the EMS gets there.
I got it. Okay.
We tend to have the faster response, you know, we're usually on scene quicker. So if there's a breathing issue or someone's unconscious,
Right,
someone's
I got
bleeding,
it.
so that's why.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We have questions or comments from members of the public at all?
Kathleen Marson, 200 Market Street, and my question is not related to fireworks at all. Perhaps Officer Whitcomb answered my question. This is a map that I gave to Henry when I was trying to show him where we needed a light. And I'm not usually hanging around outside of my building that much, but over the weekend on 4th of July, we had a little cookout outside. And 3 cars came through our parking lot and had to turn around and go back out again because GPS, I'm happy that you brought that because the GPS shows where, when someone in my building would call the police department, they would, and you asked where their location was, they would say 200 Market Street because that's their mailing address. It's not the GPS location of the building. And if you look at the GPS location, you actually can't access our building from Market Street. So it has to be accessed by Dutton because of the scaffolding that's been set up. So it's a little, you know, it's a strange little enclave with a lot of buildings and you know, canal, you know, and so, but Craig was just saying that there's a way to, you know, identify, I'll send him this electronically, there's a way for you to identify what the actual access is to a particular building. Because so now we actually stopped a person who turned around and they showed us their GPS, and that's how we found out about it. They said, no, it says you can get to Market Street from here. And we said, no, we can't. So I was on the phone with dispatcher one day for a stolen vehicle, and the dispatcher was awesome, just wonderful, but kept saying to me, we can't find you. And the officer called on his cell phone and said, can you tell me exactly where you are? And I said, turn left, and I was like, waved. Here I am, right here. So it just, if there's anything that, I'm happy to take you on a field trip, whatever works, to just figure out when someone calls, what building down in that little area are they actually located in? Thank you.
We actually do training. We had an incident. We trained all the dispatchers to ask those pertinent questions. Where in that complex we do have some rather large complexes in the city of Lowell, so we have to try to pull the information from the caller so that we can find, are you in the back, are you in the front?
Right.
How can we get in through the side? So I think I remember a couple of calls over
Yeah.
there that myself, we've done some extra training in it so that we can kind of update the dispatchers to find the entry point for the police when they're on the way there, so it's more helpful.
Well, and just as a suggestion, particularly for Market Mills, there's really 4 buildings there, and they all have the same address, but there's actually 4 buildings. So if I think that probably the residents don't know how to identify where they are to the dispatch when they call. So maybe you could speak with the actual property manager. Thanks.
I don't have any comments about fireworks either. My name is Taya Dixon-Lane. I live at 63 South Lawrence Street, and the president of the Lower Highlands Neighborhood Group. And this discussion is pertinent. A couple weeks ago, we had a sidewalk meeting, as we often do in the Lower Highlands, with residents on Westford and Smith Street in that area. And this is a conversation that has come up for years about the public's concern for calling the police department. They feel like quite often, and I hear this every meeting I ever go to, because the police are always there nicely answering questions to the public, that they feel like they're bothering the police if they call about things. And I can honestly say I'm guilty of this too. I just told Captain Taylor that there were 3 prostitutes on the street on 7:30 in the morning on Saturday when I was on my way to the Owl Diner for breakfast, and I didn't call. And the reason why I didn't call is that they're always there. And residents who live on Westford Street a couple weeks ago when we were on a sidewalk meeting said the same thing. So at some point when people give up calling, the problem persists, and we as a city need to do something about that. People have also indicated that they are concerned about giving out their name and address. They fear that that information is going to go out over the police dispatch radio, and some sort of retribution is going to happen to them. And although I try to reassure people that it's unlikely criminals are following the police dispatch, they are concerned about that. And so I'm not sure how to address that when you're trying to respond to a call when they have to give out an address. But that's something that the public has expressed to me, and the police is very concerning. And, you know, I think the other thing is that the other thing I've heard is that we need to better educate the public about how dispatch calls are responded to. And whether that is follow-up, I think that probably would be helpful, so that people know that there is some resolution to this. You know, we read about things in the papers, you know, eventually when something gets through the courts and somebody gets arrested, but they don't hear about what happens to the party down the street that they called 4 times about, you know, what happened. And I think maybe they'd be a little more responsive and be more encouraged to call if they had some reassurance that somebody was actually doing something. Even though we all know you are, but so, I mean, I guess what I would suggest is, you know, for something that the city council and the police department to consider is some sort of public safety campaign to encourage people and reassure people that they should be calling. This is more work for the police department, but I always like giving you guys more work, to, you know, increase those calls, because then you'll know where the crime is happening. Thank you.
Deb Forgione, I'm the chairman of the Pawtuckaville Citizen Council, and I had 2 questions in the categories. Under what category does inspectional services and animal control come under? If someone's calling about a dog, what category?
Well, we would respond if you call for a complaint about a particular dog. That would come into the police dispatch center, and then we would channel that to the animal control officer.
On weekends as well?
Yes.
Okay. How about inspectional services? Someone calls and says that that someone's putting a roof on and they don't have a permit. Under what category?
Well, we would certainly take the call. We would hopefully the dispatcher would ask you to call back during normal business hours to inspectional services, and channel it to their attention.
Okay, so then that leads me to a request. Can we get a weekend inspectional services staff, an on-call, a beeper, something? Because I know there are calls that go into the police. It's less calls that they'll have to take. Right. A good management company has on-call maintenance people. And I have called many times about roofing that's being done without a permit. Driveways have gone in over the weekends. We'll call on a Saturday, the driveway's going in, everybody knows it, it goes in, and then on Monday, it gets ripped out. So could we?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Councilman Donser actually made a motion on this about a month ago, I think, or thereabouts, and we're putting together a system with that. And Mr. Bakey will be here a little bit later, and we can talk about it perhaps, but it is something that we're putting together, not so much to have an inspector on duty, but instead someone on call that could be reached for emergencies like that we would then be able to respond to.
Great idea. Its time has come. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Anne Marie Page. I'm the president of the Citywide Neighborhood Council. And in regards to dispatch, we realize we do not have enough staff to handle fireworks. So somebody's got to try to figure out that problem. And I did get a call on the 4th of July at 10 past 10 at night because of the fireworks from an elderly lady, and I just told her, don't panic, stay in the house. Well, I'm calling the police, but they're not coming. Well, that's because there's not enough of them. You know, you can only be so many places. And we also all know that Centerville made the front page again. What a surprise. We had a little fireworks going on at the res, but we always have a little fireworks going on at the res, so maybe we have to have another plan for that. But somebody's ringing. But in regards to dispatch, when I've called in, I expect that person to identify themselves. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Personally, I think it's a courtesy to me as a citizen. Second, I think it's a safety net for the person on the other end, because all the calls are recorded, right? Also, we know this is a huge city. We know you get called for everything from taxi cab service to a real emergency. So we want to be sure that when the call comes in, even though it might not be a 911 or a blood-curdling fight, we are told as neighborhood leaders to tell our neighborhood people, if it doesn't look right, it isn't right, call it in. All that we ask is that dispatch send the call. Where it goes after that is your problem. We just wanted to go from our phone to dispatch and from dispatch to police. Then the police handle it from there. And we do realize that some people do ask that, well, what is your name? What is your number? And I know a lot of people don't want to give a name and number because they don't want to hear it going out on a scanner. There are still some people in the city that have scanners. But we also realize if the police officer gets to the scene and he doesn't see what we just called in, if he can contact you as a citizen, maybe he can get a little more information. So we have to work as team players. But I would very much like to see identification. I pick up the phone, I call in, Lowell Police Department, you're being recorded, Jane Smith. Oh, I don't even need Jane, just Smith. But I want an identification. I have called and I have asked. I've identified myself and I've asked, with whom am I speaking? But that, I think, would be a good idea right from the get-go. Another question, are you short of help? If so, are you getting more?
Are you talking about in the communications room?
I beg your pardon?
Are you asking in the communications room or on the?
Right, I'm talking about dispatch.
We are short, and we're in the hiring process now. We have several vacancies, and we are filling those at the moment.
Very good. Because like you said, and like we've all said, this is a big city. This isn't a little town or something.
We're still staffing, but using overtime to do so, so that's not how we want to continue long-term, but.
No, that's an expensive way.
No, but, I mean, the positions are filled, just not with full-time staff in all of the positions, but we are working on that now.
Okay, and we also know that I was surprised at the figures, because usually the summer is a little hot and heavy, right, physically and mentally, and I was surprised to see the figures were high in November and December.
Right.
Right? And we also know now you take medical as well. But I think I would like to see that, and we realize, I think your second shift, as you said, is busy, and third, but I'd like to see that. If I call in, I want to know who I'm talking to, and I don't want that dispatch person to decide if I need a police officer or not. I want her to send the call out, or him to send the call out, and then the police officers in charge will make the decision. How's that sound?
Good.
Thank you for your hard work. Appreciate it.
I can answer one aspect of her question about the identification of the dispatchers. If you call 911, it's very quick. They are trying to get the information as quickly as possible from the person that's calling, so they don't give their name. It's just Lowell Police, which are emergency. If you call the regular business line, they're supposed to give their identification.
And I'll clarify, I was not speaking of 911. I know that is the animal amounts itself. I was speaking on a regular 3200 call.
They are supposed to
That's what I
identify
thought.
themselves, right?
Thank you very much.
Chief, you've,
If I may just add one more bit of
Sure.
information. One of the things that we're seeing now with the advances in technology is folks don't need a police scanner to listen to us. They're able to download apps on their cell phone and listen to our radio frequencies. I've actually had a detailed discussion with a gentleman that lives in the Highlands that made some direct observations about this. He was having an ongoing problem with a neighbor and loud parties and disturbances and such, and he would watch them actually be listening. And when we would come, once the call was dispatched, they would cease operations, disappear for a while, and then resume. So this technology exists. I know that Deputy Taylor educated me about it. He has it on his cell phone, and he can listen to the Lowell Police Department transmissions. So as technology, that's an additional, trust me, if some of these young people have it and they were setting off fireworks, I'm sure they were listening for us to come as well, and it's a little bit of a challenge for us. And the other thing with respect to the fireworks, people don't know necessarily precisely where they're coming from. And nor do we. When we arrive, you may see them up in the air, and then you try to find the exact location where they're being set off. It's not always that simple to identify the source. And then it is, although things might photograph well in the light of day, the debris that's left behind, at 11 o'clock at night, it's not as easy to see that same amount of debris in the weeds and the brush and such. And people, there might be a group of individuals there, but who set the fireworks off? Who possesses these fireworks and such. So I'm just saying it's a little bit of a challenge. In the light of day, it looks a little bit different, but we do understand the volume. We observed it, we hear it, we are disturbed by it as well, but it's a little bit of a challenge. And the other thing is that the tools that are available to us through the law are not all that significant. The penalty for setting off fireworks ranges from a $10 fine to a $100 fine, and that's it. There's no right of arrest just for setting off fireworks. So it's a little bit of a challenge in terms of what's available to us under the law, despite the potential for serious injury. And obviously, we don't have any reports that anyone was injured by fireworks, but certainly the peace was disturbed by the fireworks, and maybe some property issues.
thanks. Councilor.
I know this meeting was about, it seems to have turned into fireworks, but that last piece of information, Chief, is a little bit of a concern, because if people know there's no penalty, or it's not a significant penalty, it's just going to get worse. And it seems that just over the border, where New Hampshire is legal and fireworks are becoming very affordable, it's really going to become a more of a significant problem. So
Exactly.
Is that a local ordinance that we could and should be looking at, or is that a state law?
Well, I'm
defines a state law?
referencing the Mass General laws, but
Right.
I mean, certainly we would support some efforts to look at a local ordinance, that we would have tools available to readily enforce, perhaps through the citation process on scene, through violation of a city ordinance.
Right.
It might be a more useful tool, and maybe leading up to next year, we can do a campaign to inform folks ahead of time, well ahead of time, because these fireworks, it's not just the 4th of July any longer. It seems to stretch out.
Right. The stores are popping up all over the place, and that means that it's affordable and that people are into it and they're buying more. I mean, in a city, in a densely populated city, it is, and I think that's the reason why we got call. You get a lot of calls, we get emails, because it is becoming a vast problem or form of entertainment, not just on 4th of July. So I think that, I don't know if we need a motion, but I think it's something that we can be proactive, because next year it will get worse, because if you can get away with it and everyone else is doing it, then I'm going to go over the line. I'm going to come back, and if I get caught, I'll pay the $10. So I don't know if we want to make that in the form of a motion to look into maybe an ordinance, increasing the fines and penalties for possessing, shooting fireworks in the city. But I think it may make some sense to at least look into it. So.
Okay. So moved by Counselor Elliott, seconded by Counselor Noon. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? So the motion carries, and we'll, I know there's other ordinances, Chief, that you talked about, so we'll add this to that group. Okay. All right, I think we're just about out of time, so any other comments? I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved by Counselor Noon, second by Counselor Elliott. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed?
Aye, sir.
So voted. We stand adjourned. Thank you.